Homecoming wounds. The stagecoach rocked to a halt, dust settling around the wooden wheels as Robin Walker clutched her medical bag against her chest. Shade Springs looked smaller than she remembered. The main street looked narrower and the buildings more weathered. 5 years could change so much, or perhaps it was just her perspective that had altered. "Here we are, Mrs. Walker," Mr. Peterson called down from the driver's seat. His weathered face crinkled into a smile as he climbed down to help her. "Careful now with those steps." "Thank you," Robin murmured, accepting his hand. Her black skirts swished against the dirt road as her dusty boots touched ground. Mr. Peterson squinted at her, recognition dawning in his rheumy eyes. "Say, I remember you now. I took you away from here once before, didn't I? But you weren't wearing black then." The memory washed over Robin unbidden. She instantly pictured herself at Shade Springs, in her white dress with wildflowers woven through her hair, Bernard waiting in the carriage with promises of Denver and prosperity on his lips. The townspeople had lined the street, cheering for the promising young nurse and her new banker husband. Today, no one cheered. A few passers-by stared openly before averting their eyes. Others whispered behind raised hands. "Your trunk, ma'am?" Mr. Peterson gestured to the small leather case that contained what remained of her life. "I can manage, thank you." Robin reached for it, but he waved her off. "I remember your grandmother too. She was the best midwife this county ever saw." He hefted Robin's trunk to the ground. "It's a shame what happened with your husband back in Denver. I should warn you that folks have long memories here." Robin only nodded. Of course they did. That's what she was counting on. And dreading. From the porch of Finch's General Store, Mrs. Patricia Finch fanned herself dramatically, leaning to whisper something to Mrs. Collins as they tracked Robin's movement down the street. Their expressions held the particular blend of judgment and curiosity that small towns perfected. "That's her, the Walker widow." Mrs. Finch's caring whisper reached Robin's ears clearly. "Her husband swindled half of Denver before hanging himself. I wonder what she's doing back here where people know what she is." Robin gripped her medical bag tightly, straightening her spine. One foot in front of the other. That's how she'd survived the last 2 years. The trial, the scandal, the funeral, and the poverty that followed. One step at a time. As she passed the doctor's office, Howard Benson emerged, a medical bag in his hand. His eyes narrowed at the sight of Robin. He'd been new to town when she'd left, replacing old Dr. Freeman. Dr. Benson had never met her, but his frown let her know he knew exactly who she was, and made his opinion clear enough. "Mrs. Walker?" He tipped his hat with cold formality before flicking his eyes to her own medical bag. "I understand you have some medical training." Robin nodded before clearing her throat. "I served with Clara Barton during the war, Dr. Benson, and completed formal nursing training after." She didn't mention Bernard's opposition to her continuing practice after marriage, or how she'd maintained her skills in secret. "Well," he sniffed, "Shady Springs has proper medical care now. No need for alternatives." Before she could respond to his harsh comment, a small figure darted between her, nearly colliding with her skirts. "Sorry, ma'am." The freckle-faced boy skidded to a stop, looking up with curious eyes. His red hair stood in untamed tufts, and his knees were scraped raw. "No harm done," Robin said, smiling despite herself. "You're Mrs. Walker, ain't you? My pa said you know how to fix people, is that true?" He pointed to your bag. "Is that where you keep your doctor things?" "Timothy Wade," Dr. Benson scolded. "Mrs. Walker is not a doctor. Run along now." The boy, Timothy, frowned at Dr. Benson but backed away. "My pa said she saved his cousin's arm in the war when real doctors wanted to cut it off," he muttered before darting away. Dr. Benson glared at Robin before giving a loud huff and continuing down the street, but not before giving her medical bag another disapproving glance. She stifled a sigh. She hadn't expected to be welcomed with open arms to her hometown, but she had hoped for a bit of softening with at least some of the townspeople. By late afternoon, Robin reached the small cottage at the edge of town that she'd arranged to rent through correspondence. Mrs. Rose Cooper stood waiting, a ring of keys dangling from her gnarled fingers. Despite her 70 years, she stood straight as a pine, and her silver hair was neatly pinned. "You look like your grandmother," she said, by way of greeting. "Same eyes, same way of watching everything." "You knew my grandmother?" Robin asked with surprise. Everyone knew Eva Green. She was the best midwife in 3 counties. Mrs. Cooper unlocked the door, revealing a modest but clean interior. "She delivered half the town, including you." Robin refrained from commenting as she took in her new surroundings. The cottage was simple, with 1 bedroom, a small kitchen, and a cozy sitting area with a stone fireplace. But through a side door, Mrs. Cooper revealed a small adjoining room with a window that let in ample light. "This was your grandmother's examining room," Mrs. Cooper explained. "There is good northern light for seeing problems clearly. The table's still sturdy." Robin ran her fingers along the worn wooden examination table. "I'm not planning to practice, Mrs. Cooper. I just need somewhere quiet to decide what to do next." She raised an eyebrow. "Hiding won't work, Robin. This town already knows you're here." "I'm not hiding. What was she doing? Starting over? Seeking redemption? Confronting old ghosts?" "It doesn't matter to me," Mrs. Cooper said, handing over the keys. "The rent's due first of the month, water pump's out back. I've left some basics in the kitchen." Robin nodded gratefully. "I appreciate." Just then, a gunshot cracked through the air, followed by shouting from Main Street. Mrs. Cooper stared in that direction. "It's from the Silver Dollar Saloon, most likely. Today is payday for the lumber mill." Without thinking, Robin grabbed her medical bag and headed outside. "Not practicing?" Mrs. Cooper's knowing smile followed her out the door. The street was in chaos. A crowd had gathered outside the Silver Dollar, where a grizzly man stood on the porch trying to calm the onlookers. "Everything's under control," he shouted. "The sheriff's on his way. Go about your business." "That's Bart Jennings," Mrs. Cooper murmured. As if summoned by the words, the crowd parted, and there he was. Sheriff Sean Callahan moved with the same purposeful stride she remembered, though he seemed harder and more weathered. The badge on his chest caught the late afternoon sun as he climbed the saloon steps. "What happened, Bart?" His voice was deeper than she remembered. "A miner named Collins got into it with Peterson's boy over cards. Peterson pulled a gun but only winged him. The man's bleeding something fierce, though." John scanned the crowd until his eyes landed on Robin. For a moment, something flickered across his face, surprise, perhaps even softness, before hardening into stone. Robin moved forward without thinking, medical bag in hand. "Step back, folks," Sean commanded, turning away from her. "Dr. Benson's been sent for." The doc was heading out to the McIntyre farm for a birthing when the shot happened, someone called out. "I doubt he'll be back for hours." Sean cursed under his breath as the saloon doors swung open again. 2 men carried out a 3rd man, blood soaking through a makeshift bandage on his shoulder. "Put pressure on it," Robin called, pushing through the crowd. Sean turned, placing a hand on her shoulder to stop her. "Shady Springs has a real doctor now, Mrs. Walker." Robin met his eyes directly for the first time in 5 years. The blue was just as intense as she remembered, but the laugh lines at the corners had deepened into something harder. "And he's not here, Sheriff Callahan. I am." She didn't break his gaze. That man could bleed out waiting for Dr. Benson to arrive. For 3 heartbeats she stood locked in silent battle with the sheriff. Then, Sean's hand dropped. "Fine. Let's get him to the doctor's office. I'll unlock it." Inside the doctor's office, the wounded miner, Collins, groaned as Robin cut away his shirt. It only took a few minutes to see that the bullet had gone clean through the fleshy part of his shoulder, missing bone and major vessels. "You are a lucky man," she murmured, reaching for carbolic acid to clean the wound. Sean stood in the doorway, arms crossed, watching her every move. She could feel his gaze as surely as the heat from the lamp beside her. "Will he live?" he asked flatly. "It's a clean wound," she replied, not looking up as she worked. "There are no fragments to remove. He'll have full use of the arm if infection doesn't set in." Her fingers moved with practiced precision, cleaning, stitching, and bandaging. The familiar work calmed her, pushing away the whispering voices, the stares, and the memories. "Where'd you learn to stitch like that?" Colin slurred through the whiskey someone had given him for the pain. "The war," Robin answered simply, securing the final bandage. "Rest now. Someone should watch you tonight for fever." "My brother's outside," Colin said. "He'll see to it." She packed up her supplies, noting how the office felt smaller and the air heavier with the sheriff watching. When Collins had been helped outside by his brother, she turned to find Sean still in the doorway, studying her with an unreadable expression. "Thank you," he said finally, the words clearly costing him. Robin shrugged. "I was just doing what needed doing." "Is that why you're back?" "Doing what needs doing." The question hung between them, weighted with all the unspoken years, all the letters she'd started but never sent, and all the choices that had led her back to Shady Springs. "I'm back because I have nowhere else to go," Robin decided to answer honestly. Something like sadness crossed his face before his expression shuddered again. He stepped aside to let her pass, but as she reached the door, he spoke again. "Your husband had smooth words too, and look where that left folks around here." The verbal slap stung exactly as intended. Bernard never touched anyone in Shady Springs. "No? Ask the Millers how they lost their farm investment. Or ask Bart how he nearly lost his saloon. Your husband's bank reached far, Robin, even after you left." She hadn't known. It was one more sin to add to Bernard's tally, and by extension hers. "I'm not my husband, Sheriff." "No," he agreed, his voice softening just enough to hurt more. "But you made your choice clear when you left with him." He tipped his hat with cool formality and turned away, leaving her alone in the doorway with her medical bag and the weight of a homecoming that felt nothing like coming home. Peeling hands. The morning after Robin's return to Shady Springs, she unpacked her medical texts and instruments in the small examining room, despite her declaration to Mrs. Cooper that she wouldn't practice. Old habits died hard, and she might as well be prepared to help out when Dr. Benson wasn't in town. She arranged her grandmother's worn copy of Gray's Anatomy beside her more modern texts on surgical techniques, letting her fingers trace the familiar spines. "Just in case," Robin murmured to herself, polishing her stethoscope. After organizing her meager possessions, which included 3 dresses, medical supplies, and a small box of personal items, she swept the cottage floors and built a fire against the autumn chill. The familiar work of setting up a household calmed her mind, pushing away thoughts of Sean's cold eyes and the whispers that had followed her down Main Street the day before. A hesitant knock interrupted her midday meal. When she opened the door, Timothy Wade stood there, shifting nervously from foot to foot. Behind him stood a small Asian girl, tears streaming down her face as she clutched her hand wrapped in a bloodied claw. "Mrs. Walker," Timothy said formally. "This is Molly. She cut her hand real bad at her pa's laundry." Robin ushered them inside without hesitation. "Let me see, Molly." The girl looked up at her with frightened eyes but extended her hand. Carefully, she unwrapped the makeshift bandage to reveal a deep gash across her palm. "A glass broke," Molly whispered. "Papa said find American doctor, but Dr. Benson not there." Robin tried not to frown at the child's words. It seemed that Dr. Benson was often not available. Timothy puffed up his chest. "I told her you're better than old Benson anyway. You fixed up soldiers." Robin bit her lip to keep a smile from forming and guided Molly to the examining room. She carefully began cleaning the wound. "This needs stitches, Molly. It's going to hurt, but I'll be quick." "I'd be brave," Molly nodded, biting her lip, but tears formed in her dark eyes. As Robin prepared the needle and silk thread, she asked gently, "Where are your parents?" "Laundry. Too busy today. Many miners' clothes." Her English was careful but clear. "Papa say hurry back to help." Robin worked swiftly but carefully, placing 7 tiny, neat stitches across Molly's palm. The child didn't cry out once, though her small body trembled under Robin's hands. "You're the bravest patient I've had," Robin told her after she made the last stitch, wrapping clean gauze around Molly's hand. "Tell your pa that this needs to stay dry and clean. Can you come back in 3 days so I can check it?" Molly studied Robin's face. "You not like other American ladies. They not want to touch Chinese." The simple observation pierced Robin's heart. "People fear what they don't understand, Molly. That doesn't make it right." As she finished the bandage, another knock came at the door. Timothy opened it to reveal a concerned-looking Chinese man and woman. "Molly," the woman rushed forward, "we worry when you not come back quick." "She's all fixed up," Robin said, standing to greet them. "Are you Molly's parents?" The man bowed slightly. "We Chen. This my wife Lin. We own laundry." His eyes moved to his daughter's bandaged hand. "How much we owe?" "Nothing," Robin replied automatically. "I was happy to help." We shook his head firmly. "Must pay. Work has value." Robin recognized the dignity in his stance. "Very well. 50 cents for the treatment." We handed over the coins, then added a small package wrapped in brown paper. "For kindness to our daughter, clean bandages. We make best in town." "Thank you." Robin accepted the gift, touched by the gesture. Lin Chen's eyes lingered on her medical instruments. "You real doctor?" "I'm a nurse. I trained during the war." Lin nodded approvingly. "Many women need help. Dr. Benson," she hesitated, glancing at her husband. "Dr. Benson has rough hands," we finished diplomatically. "Not good for ladies and children." After they left, Robin stood in the doorway watching them walk back toward town. Molly walked between her parents and Timothy trailed along beside them, chattering excitedly. Something warm unfurled in Robin's chest. This was why she'd become a nurse. Not for status or recognition, but for moments like these. Over the next week, more visitors appeared at Robin's door. A mill worker with a splinter embedded too deeply to remove himself, a young mother with a colicky baby, and an elderly man with joint pain. She'd intended to keep a low profile, but word had spread. The Walker widow might have a sullied name, but she had gentle hands and reasonable rates. She was sorting herbs in her kitchen when hoofbeats and men's voices drew her to the window. 3 riders approached her cottage. She immediately recognized Sheriff Callahan, a young man who she assumed was his deputy, and another man leading 3 horses with bound riders slumped in their saddles. She quickly stepped onto her porch as they passed, medical instinct making her scan the prisoners for injuries. One young man's shirt was soaked with blood, his face ashen despite the dirt covering it. Without thinking, she called out, "Sheriff, that man needs medical attention." John reined in his horse, turning to regard Robin with that guarded expression he'd perfected. "We are heading to Dr. Benson now, Mrs. Walker." "He won't make it to his office," Robin insisted, moving closer. "Not with that much blood loss." She also didn't want to point out that the town doctor might not even be at his office, which seemed to be a habit of his. Sean's young deputy, scarcely more than a boy himself with his carefully groomed mustache, spoke up. "She's right, Sheriff. He's barely staying in the saddle." "He's are the Reed brothers' men, Frank," Sean reminded him sharply. "They are wanted in 3 territories." Robin assessed the wounded prisoner more carefully and noted that he couldn't be older than 19, with a boy's face beneath the grime and blood. "Criminals bleed the same as honest men, Sheriff." Something flashed in Sean's eyes. Robin saw frustration and maybe respect, but she couldn't be sure. He dismounted with a sigh. "Fine, we'll stop here, but I'm not uncuffing him." The prisoner was half conscious as Sean and Frank carried him into Robin's examining room, leaving the other man outside to guard the other prisoners. Robin could immediately see that his wound was at least 2 days old, with a bullet still lodged in his shoulder. Infection was settling in. Without saying anything, she began to cut away his filthy shirt. "This bullet needs to come out," she said, preparing her instruments. "Hold him steady." Deputy Frank looked green around the gills but positioned himself at the prisoner's head. Sheriff stood by the door, hand resting on his gun. "What's his name?" Robin asked as she began to clean the wound. "Jeff Reed," Sean answered. "He's the youngest of the Reed brothers. They've been terrorizing the territory for 2 years." Robin glanced at Jeff's face. He looked so young beneath the dirt and strain. As she probed for the bullet, he jerked awake, eyes wide with fear and pain. "Easy," Robin murmured. "I'm removing the bullet. Try to stay still." "Hurts," he gasped. "I know, just a bit longer." Her fingers quickly found the slug, extracting it with a swift motion that drew a cry from Jeff. As she worked to clean and close the wound, he drifted in and out of consciousness, mumbling about his brothers. "Victor said, had to come along. Didn't want to." His feverish ramblings continued as you stitched the wound closed. "His brothers forced him to join them," Robin observed to Sean, not looking up from her work. "After your parents died?" Jeff's glazed eyes found hers. "How do you know?" "You're not the first young man who followed a destructive path after losing family." She thought of the boys she'd treated during the war. Some had been barely older than Jeff, following older brothers or fathers into battle. John shifted in the doorway. "Don't let him fool you, Robin. The Reed gang has killed 6 men that we know of." The use of her given name startled her, warming something that had been cold for too long. She looked up to find Sean's eyes on her hands as she worked, something unreadable in his expression. "I'm not fooled," she replied softly, "but I've learned that people are rarely just one thing." The words hung between them, laden with meaning beyond Jeff's situation. For a moment, Sean's guarded expression slipped, revealing a glimpse of the young man she'd once known. The memory surfaced unbidden. She was sitting beside Shady Springs Creek at 14, watching 17-year-old Sean skip stones across the water. The summer sun had turned his hair golden. "I'm going to be a doctor someday," she remembered telling him solemnly. "Like my grandmother, but better. I'll fix everyone who's broken." And then she remembered how he'd looked at her with such certainty. "You will, Robin Green. You've got healing in your hands." A stone then left from his hand, skipping 5 times before disappearing. She'd then tried herself, but hers sank immediately. He laughed and positioned himself behind her, his arms guiding hers for the next throw. "Like this," he'd murmured, his breath warm against her ear. She blinked away the memory, focusing on finishing Jeff's bandages as Deputy Frank helped the semi-conscious prisoner sit up. "He needs rest and clean bandages daily," Robin instructed, washing blood from her hands, "and broth if you can manage it." "Dr. Benson can see to that," Sean said, his professional mask back in place. But an hour later Sean returned alone, his expression grim. "Dr. Benson refuses to treat him. He says he won't waste his time and medicines on outlaws." Robin dried the instruments she'd been cleaning, doing her best to stay calm. "And you disagree?" "It doesn't matter what I think. The boy needs medical care if he's going to stand trial. So this is about justice, not mercy." Sean's jaw tightened. "Is there a difference?" "My grandmother thought so," she replied, gathering fresh bandages. "I'll come check on him." At the jail, Jeff lay on a thin mattress in the last cell, shivering despite the blanket covering him. Deputy Frank hovered anxiously nearby. "He started talking crazy about 20 minutes ago," Frank reported. "He said something about his brothers coming for the payroll." Robin pressed her hand to Jeff's forehead. "He's burning up. The fever's making him delirious." Jeff's eyes fluttered open, focusing on Robin with difficulty. "They're coming," he whispered. "Victor and Mac, for the payroll, Saturday." John frowned from the cell doorway. "What payroll, Jeff?" "Lumber mill," Jeff gasped. "15th of the month, always." Robin dampened a cloth and placed it on his forehead. "That's in 3 days." "He's delirious," Sean dismissed, though she noticed him write something in a small notebook. "He's probably trying to create a distraction." Jeff thrashed an arm suddenly, nearly knocking over the water basin. As Robin steadied it, her hand brushed against Sean's. For a heartbeat, neither of them moved, and the simple contact sent unexpected warmth through her fingers. John withdrew first, clearing his throat. "Deputy Miller can handle the bandages." Frank looked positively ill at the suggestion. "I don't know the first thing about—" "I'll stay," Robin interrupted. "He needs monitoring through the night." "That's not necessary," Sean began. "It is if you want him alive for trial." Robin settled into the chair beside Jeff's cell. "I've spent plenty of nights watching over patients, Sheriff. One more won't hurt." Sean studied her for a long moment before nodding curtly. "Frank, fetch Mrs. Walker some coffee. I'll take first watch with her." After Frank left, silence settled between Robin and Sean, punctuated only by Jeff's labored breathing. "You always were stubborn," Sean said, his voice softer than she'd heard since her return. "It served me well during the war," she replied, checking Jeff's pulse. "Men don't like taking orders from women, even when they're bleeding to death." A ghost of a smile touched Sean's lips. "I remember your grandmother threatening to box Dr. Freeman's ears when he contradicted her about Mrs. Miller's birthing troubles." "She was right, of course," she said, smiling at the memory. "She usually was." Sean's eyes met yours. "She would have been proud of your work today." The simple validation pierced through her carefully constructed armor. Before she could respond, Frank returned with coffee, and the moment dissolved like morning mist. As night deepened, she sat vigil beside Jeff's cell, occasionally checking his fever or spooning broth between his cracked lips. Across the room, Sean completed paperwork at his desk, the scratching of his pen and the ticking of the clock the only sounds. She couldn't help wondering what might have been if she'd made different choices, if she'd stayed in Shady Springs, if she'd married Sean instead of Bernard. But regrets, like memories, served little purpose now. She had a patient to heal, a reputation to rebuild, and a future, however uncertain, to face. For tonight, that was enough. Old flames, new dangers. Robin Walker's daily visits to the jail were the most consistent entertainment Shady Springs had seen since the traveling medicine show came through last spring. Each morning, she walked briskly up Main Street with her medical bag, nodding politely at those who acknowledged her and ignoring those who didn't. By her third day tending to Jeff Reed, the whispers had grown louder. "She might as well set up her practice in the jail," Patricia Finch remarked to anyone within earshot as Robin passed the general store. "She is spending more time with outlaws than decent folk." Robin kept her expression neutral, though her grip on her medical bag tightened. Jeff Reed's fever had finally broken yesterday, and she wasn't about to let town gossip prevent her from seeing his recovery through. Outside the jailhouse, she encountered Mayor Harlan Wilson in conversation with Sean. The mayor cut off mid-sentence when he spotted her. "Mrs. Walker," Mayor Wilson said, stroking his impressive mustache. "Quite dedicated to your patient, aren't you?" "Good morning, Mayor." "Sheriff." Robin nodded at both men. "I'm just checking Mr. Reed's wound for infection." Mayor Wilson puffed up like a disturbed rooster. "Surely, that's Deputy Miller's job now? Or Dr. Benson's?" "Dr. Benson has made his position clear," Robin replied evenly, "and Deputy Miller turns green at the sight of blood." Sean suppressed what might have been a smile. "The prisoner is still my responsibility, Mayor. I'd rather not have him die before facing justice." "Well," the mayor harumphed, "I've received concerned comments about the propriety of a widow spending so much time with criminals." He lowered his voice. "Given your background, Mrs. Walker, appearances matter." Robin felt heat rise in her cheeks. "I assure you, Mayor, my only concern is preventing gangrene. It's not very proper either, I imagine." "Mrs. Walker's medical attention is officially sanctioned," Sean interrupted. "If anyone has concerns, they can bring them to me directly." Mayor Wilson raised his eyebrows at Sean's firm tone. "I see. Well, I've made my point. Good day to you both." As the mayor waddled away, Robin turned to Sean. "You didn't need to defend me." "I wasn't defending you, just stating the facts." Sean opened the jailhouse door. "Your patient's been asking for you." Inside, Jeff sat up on his cot, significantly improved from the half-dead prisoner they'd brought in. His face had regained some color and the infection was receding from his wound. "Morning, Mrs. Walker," he said as Robin approached his cell. "The deputy says I can have real food today if you say so." "Let's change that bandage first." Robin set her bag down and waited for Sean to unlock the cell. As she worked, a woman's voice called from the front office. "Sheriff Callahan?" "In here, Miss Palmer," Sean responded. Miss Palmer entered carrying a stack of books. The woman's wire-rimmed glasses did nothing to diminish her natural elegance. "I've brought those law volumes you requested," Miss Palmer said, setting the books on Sean's desk. Her gaze shifted to Robin. "Mrs. Walker, I'm glad to see you. I've been hoping to introduce myself." "Miss Palmer teaches at the school," Sean explained. "And I've been quite impressed hearing about your medical background," Miss Palmer continued. "I've heard that you were part of Clara Barton's nursing corps during the war and received formal training afterward. It's remarkable." Robin looked up in surprise. "Thank you, though I wonder how you heard all that." "Timothy Wade has become your most vocal champion," Miss Palmer smiled. "He's been regaling my students with tales of your surgical prowess, somewhat embellished, I suspect." As if summoned by his name, Timothy burst through the door, a bunch of wildflowers clutched in his dirty hand. "Mrs. Walker," he exclaimed, "Molly's pa says her hand's healing real good and she can help in the laundry again." He thrust the flowers toward her. "These are from both of us." Robin accepted the wildflowers, touched by the simple gesture. "That's wonderful news, Timothy. Please tell Molly to still be careful with that hand." "I will," he puffed up importantly. "Can I help you today? I could carry your bag or fetch things or—" "Timothy," Sean interrupted, "don't you have school?" Timothy's face fell. "Yes, sir. But after?" "After school," Robin compromised. "You can help me organize my herb cabinet." The boy beamed and dashed out, nearly colliding with Deputy Miller in the doorway. "It looks like you've got yourself an apprentice," Sean observed after Timothy left. "Every doctor needs one," Miss Palmer said, gathering her things. "Mrs. Walker, I host a small reading circle on Thursday evenings. We're discussing Mary Wollstonecraft next week. You'd be most welcome." After the schoolteacher departed, Robin finished changing Jeff's bandage in thoughtful silence. An invitation to a social gathering, her first since returning. Perhaps there were some people in Shady Springs who weren't entirely closed to her. "Your wound is healing well," she told Jeff. "The sheriff can tell Deputy Miller to give you a proper meal." "Thank you, ma'am." Jeff's eyes darted to where Sean stood watching. "I never had anyone but family care whether I lived or died before." "Speaking of family," Sean said, "I'm still waiting to hear where we might find your brothers." Jeff's expression shuddered. "I already told you. I don't know where they're holed up. But they're still planning to hit the lumber mill payroll? Victor doesn't change plans, he just makes people sorry they got in his way." Robin gathered her supplies, troubled by the fear in Jeff's voice when he spoke of his eldest brother. As promised, Timothy appeared at Robin's cottage after school, eager to help sort dried herbs and organize supplies. His constant chatter filled the small house with a warmth Robin hadn't realized she'd been missing. "The sheriff used to be a U.S. Marshal, you know," Timothy informed her as he carefully labeled jars. "He caught the Dobson gang all by himself." "Is that so?" Robin smiled at his enthusiasm. "Yep, he came back to be our sheriff 3 years ago. Pa says there hasn't been trouble since, except for drunken miners." Timothy paused. "Pa also said Sheriff Callahan was sweet on you before you married the banker man." Robin nearly dropped the mortar she was cleaning. "Your pa talks too much, Timothy Wade." "Sorry." Timothy looked abashed. "I just thought it was interesting, is all." As twilight descended, Robin sent Timothy home and prepared a simple supper. She was washing dishes when a firm knock sounded at her door. Opening it revealed Sean, hat in hand, his expression unreadable in the fading light. "Sheriff," she said, surprised, "has something happened with Jeff?" "May I come in?" His voice was tight with an emotion she couldn't identify. She stepped back, suddenly aware of her loosened hair and flour-smudged apron. Sean entered, his large frame making her small cottage seem even smaller. He didn't sit when she offered, instead standing rigidly by the fireplace. "I need to ask you something," he said finally, "and I need the truth." Robin folded her hands to stop their trembling. "All right. Did you know what your husband was doing? The investments he took? The lives he ruined?" The bluntness of the question struck like a physical blow. "Why are you asking this now?" "Because I need to know if I can trust you." Sean's blue eyes bored into hers. Bernard Walker swindled nearly 50 families across 3 territories. Some lost everything. 2 men took their lives when they realized they couldn't support their families. "I'm aware of my husband's crimes," Robin said quietly. "Were you aware while he was committing them?" Sean pressed. Anger flared in her chest. "Do you think I was part of it? That I helped him?" "I think you were smart enough to notice if your husband was stealing from people." "Yes, I was." Robin's voice shook with suppressed emotion. "Smart enough to find the discrepancies in his ledgers, smart enough to realize what he was doing, and principled enough to report him to the authorities myself." Sean stared at her, clearly stunned. "You reported him?" "I found proof he was falsifying investment returns. When I confronted him, he told me it was none of my concern." Robin's hands clenched into fists. "So I took his ledgers to the U.S. Marshal in Denver. I testified against my own husband in court." Understanding dawned on Sean's face. "That's why he took his own life?" "Yes." Robin turned away, unable to bear his scrutiny. The night before sentencing, Bernard hanged himself in his cell. His suicide note blamed me for his disgrace. His family made sure everyone knew it was his disloyal wife who brought him down. The silence that followed seemed to stretch endlessly. When she finally turned back, Sean's expression had softened from suspicion to something more complicated. "I didn't know," he said simply. "No one here does. It was easier to let people believe I was just another foolish woman, deceived by her husband. The admission cost her, but the relief of speaking the truth outweighed the pain. I've carried enough shame for both of us, Sean." Before he could respond, urgent knocking interrupted them. Deputy Miller burst in without waiting for an answer. "Sheriff, you need to come quick." Frank's youthful face was flushed with excitement. "A writer delivered a message at the jail. It's addressed to Jeff Reed." At the jail, Sean unfolded the crude note. Robin read over his shoulder. "Blood for blood. 3 days. Victor." Jeff paled when Sean showed him the message. "He knows I'm alive. That means he's close. Close enough to have help in town," Frank added breathlessly. "Sheriff, I found something when I was sweeping. Someone's been sawing at the back window bars." John examined the damage. Several bars were partially cut, weakened enough to break with sufficient force. "Someone in town is helping the Reed gang," Sean concluded grimly. "Jeff might recognize who it is," Robin suggested, "if we could bring him somewhere public and watch people's reactions." "Absolutely not," Sean cut her off. "I'm not parading a prisoner around town as bait." "I'll do it," Jeff interjected unexpectedly. "If it helps to catch whoever's helping Victor, I'll do it." Sean studied him suspiciously. "Why would you turn on your brother's accomplice?" Jeff's young face hardened. "Victor left me to die with a bullet in my shoulder. Family doesn't do that." The next morning, Sean called an emergency town council meeting. Robin stood beside him as he explained the threat to Shady Springs. "The Reed gang is planning to rob the lumber mill payroll on Saturday," Sean informed the gathered council members. "We have reason to believe they have an accomplice in town." Mayor Wilson mopped his brow with a handkerchief. "This is disastrous timing. The territorial governor is visiting next week." "I believe our immediate safety is more pressing than a political visit, Mayor," said Miss Palmer tartly. Dr. Benson sniffed disdainfully. "And we're to trust the word of an outlaw and a—" he glanced at Robin. "Nurse?" "Mrs. Walker's medical skills saved Jeff Reed's life," Sean stated firmly. "Without his information, we'd be unprepared for this attack." Mrs. Cooper, representing the town's property owners, spoke up. "What do you need from us, Sheriff?" "We need to prepare for casualties," Sean replied. "Dr. Benson, I'll need your office ready for emergency surgeries." The doctor nodded grudgingly. "I can set up a secondary medical station at my cottage," Robin offered, "for overflow or if the main street becomes unsafe." To her surprise, Dr. Benson didn't object. Instead, he said gruffly, "I'll send some supplies for your station. Bandages, carbolic acid, and the like." Robin glanced at him in surprise. "Thank you." After the meeting concluded, Sean walked Robin back to her cottage in the fading daylight. "That went better than expected," she remarked. "People respect competence even when they don't like where it comes from." Sean glanced at her. "I waited, you know." "What?" "After you left, I waited a year for a letter, something to explain why you chose him." The simple confession pierced her more deeply than any accusation. "I wrote to you," Robin admitted softly, "dozens of times. I never sent them." "Why not?" "Because I was ashamed of my choice. Because I knew you'd be disappointed in me." She met his eyes. "Because you deserved someone who chose you first, not someone who regretted not choosing you." They reached her cottage as the first stars shone overhead. Sean assisted her in gathering medical supplies, their movements falling into a seamless rhythm that bridged the years they had spent apart. As Robin reached for a roll of bandages, Sean's hand covered hers. Neither pulled away. His calloused fingers were warm against her skin. "I would have stood by you," he said quietly, "even after you married him. If you'd written, if you'd needed help." "That's exactly why I couldn't write," Robin replied, her voice barely above a whisper. "You were always too good, Sean, too honorable." His free hand rose to brush a strand of hair from her face. For a heartbeat, the years between them seemed to vanish. Robin found herself leaning closer, drawn by the familiar blue of his eyes. The cottage door flew open, shattering the moment. Timothy stood in the doorway, breathless and wide-eyed. "Sheriff, Mrs. Walker. There's men watching the town from Settlers Ridge," he exclaimed. "Pa says they got rifles." Sean's hand dropped from Robin's face, but the warmth of his touch lingered as they rushed to meet the coming danger. Siege. Dawn broke hazy over Shady Springs, the sun struggling through clouds that matched the town's somber mood. Robin had barely slept, spending the night preparing supplies and organizing her cottage for potential casualties. The normally bustling main street lay eerily quiet. Shutters were closed, businesses locked, and families sheltering inside on what should have been a busy market day. Robin moved briskly between her makeshift clinic and the jail, medical bag thumping against her side and watching for any sign of the Reed gang. Each time she passed the stagecoach office, she noted the clock. It was 3 hours until the payroll wagon was scheduled to arrive. At the jail, she found Jeff pacing his cell, agitation evident in every movement. "You should be resting that shoulder," she admonished, setting down her bag. "I can't rest," Jeff muttered. "Victor will come at midday when the payroll arrives. He likes an audience." Sean looked up from loading rifles at his desk. "How many men does your brother usually ride with?" 8, maybe 10, Jeff replied. "Victor, Mac, and the regular crew, all good shots." Deputy Miller entered, his youthful face pinched with worry. "Mrs. Cooper's boarding house is full of women and children from the outlying farms. The mayor has ordered everyone to stay inside." "Good," Sean said, handing Frank a loaded shotgun. "Are there any sign of riders from the North Ridge?" "Nothing yet, Sheriff." The saloon doors creaked open as Bart Jenkins entered, carrying a well-worn shotgun that looked like it had seen service in the war between the states. "I came to offer my services, Sheriff," the saloon owner announced. "These old hands still remember how to fight." Sean nodded appreciatively. "Position yourself upstairs at the general store. Make sure you get a good view of the main approach." The door opened again, revealing Wei Chen, his face solemn but determined. "Sheriff Callahan, laundry back room very safe, stone walls, small windows, good place for children." "Thank you, Mr. Chen," Sean replied with genuine respect. "Frank, spread the word. Children can shelter at the Chinese laundry." As we left, Robin touched his arm. "Your family should hide too." We shook his head. "I help defend. This our home now." The quiet solidarity in his words tightened Robin's throat. When he departed, she turned to find Sean watching her. "You should join the others at Mrs. Cooper's," he said. "You know I won't," she replied simply. Something passed between them. There was understanding, perhaps even pride. Sean nodded once. "Stay near your clinic then. We'll bring the wounded to you." As midday approached, the tension grew palpable. Robin stationed herself in her cottage, instruments sterilized and ready, listening for the rumble of the payroll wagon. When it came, the sound of iron-rimmed wheels on packed dirt seemed unnaturally loud in the silent town. Then came another sound. Hoofbeats, many hoofbeats, approaching from multiple directions. The first shot cracked through the air like thunder. Shouts erupted as the Reed gang descended on Shady Springs, firing indiscriminately at windows and doorways. From her cottage window, Robin counted at least a dozen riders, more than Jeff had predicted. A booming voice called out from the center of town, "Sean Callahan, send out my brother and the payroll money, and we'll leave your pathetic town standing." Victor Reed sat tall in his saddle. He was a broad-shouldered man with cold eyes and a jagged scar down his right cheek. Even at a distance, Robin could see the family resemblance to Jeff. John's voice rang out from behind the cover of the jail. "Your brother's facing justice, Reed. Surrender now, and so will you." Victor's response was a barrage of gunfire toward the jail. Bullets splintered wood and shattered glass all along Main Street as the gang members took positions around the town. Crouching below her window, Robin heard a cry from outside. Peering carefully over the sill, she saw Dr. Benson crumpled in the street, halfway between his office and the general store. Blood spread across his trouser leg where a bullet had found its mark. Without hesitation, Robin grabbed her bag and darted out of the door. Bullets kicked up dust at her feet as she ran, reaching the fallen doctor and dragging him toward the shelter of a water trough. "Foolish woman," Dr. Benson gasped, clutching his bleeding thigh. "You'll get yourself killed." "Press here," Robin instructed, placing his hands over the wound before signaling to Bart Jenkins, who provided covering fire while she and the doctor made it to the relative safety of the general store. Inside, Mrs. Finch cowered behind the counter while Robin quickly assessed Dr. Benson's injury. "Clean through and through," she determined. "You're lucky, Doctor." "Luck had nothing to do with it," he grunted as she bandaged him tightly. "Good aim, perhaps." Once the doctor was stabilized, Robin moved from building to building, treating those caught in the crossfire. A bullet had grazed Mrs. Finch's husband. Young Timothy's father had taken a shot to the arm, and Wei Chen was bleeding from flying glass shards when a window exploded near him. Amid the chaos, Sean remained steadfast in organizing the town's defenses. While directing his deputy and assigning positions to the volunteer townsmen, he never lost track of Robin's whereabouts. After an hour of intermittent fire, Robin returned to her cottage to replenish supplies. She found Jeff Reed inside, unshackled and breathless. "How did you escape?" she demanded, automatically checking his wounded shoulder. "It doesn't matter," he panted. "Victor's planning to burn your clinic. He says it'll draw out the sheriff." "You came to warn me?" Robin asked incredulously. Jeff nodded. "You treated me fair. Victor wouldn't." His words were cut short by the crash of breaking glass. A flaming bottle flew through Robin's window, shattering against her examination table. Flames leapt instantly, catching the dry wood and linens. "Out!" Robin shouted, grabbing her medical bag and as many supplies as she could carry. Jeff helped her, filling his arms with bandages and medicines before they fled through the back door. They emerged into chaos. More firebombs had struck other buildings. Smoke filled the air. Through the haze, Robin spotted Sean running toward her cottage. "Robin!" he shouted when he saw her. Relief washed over his face before hardening into anger at the sight of Jeff. "What is he doing unshackled?" "He came to warn me," Robin explained, coughing through the smoke. "The clinic's lost, Sean." For a moment, Sean's stern facade cracked, revealing something raw and sympathetic. "We'll rebuild it," he promised, helping her carry medical supplies toward the church. As they turned the corner behind the burning cottage, a figure stepped into their path. Victor Reed stood before them, his scarred face twisted in cold fury, pistol aimed squarely at Sean's chest. "Hello, little brother," Victor said, eyes fixed on Jeff. "Comfortable with your new friends?" "Victor, don't," Jeff pleaded. "This has gone too far." "Shut up, traitor." Victor's gaze shifted to Sean. "Drop your gun, Sheriff." Sean slowly complied, keeping himself positioned between Victor and Robin. "Your men are being captured, Reed. It's over." Victor sneered. "Nothing's over till I say it is." His finger tightened on the trigger. Everything happened in a blur. Sean lunged forward as the shot rang out. His body jerked backward, crimson blossoming on his shirt as he fell. "Sean!" Robin screamed, dropping her supplies to catch him. Victor stepped closer, gun now trained on her. How touching, the lawman and the nurse. In that moment, something cold and precise took over Robin's movements. Her hand closed around the scalpel in her pocket, the one she always carried for emergencies. As Victor reached to grab her, she slashed upward, opening a deep gash across his gun hand. Victor howled in pain and rage, blood spurting from the severed artery. His gun clattered to the ground. Before he could recover, Jeff tackled him from behind, sending both brothers sprawling into the dirt. "Get the sheriff help!" Jeff shouted, struggling to subdue his brother. Robin turned to Sean, medical training taking precedence over panic. The bullet had entered his chest, dangerously close to his heart. His breathing came in shallow gasps, blood bubbling at his lips. "I need help," she screamed toward the street. "The sheriff's been shot." Deputy Miller appeared with Bart Jenkins, both men pale at the sight of Sean's wound. "Dr. Benson," Frank began. "No time," Robin cut him off. "I need to remove this bullet now or he'll die. Help me get him to the church." The church's double doors swung open as the men carried Sean inside. Reverend Walsh stood from his prayers, eyes widening at the bloody scene. "Mrs. Walker, this is a house of God," he protested as they laid Sean on the altar. "Then it's the perfect place to save a life," Robin replied, already cutting away Sean's bloody shirt. "I need clean water, all the coal oil lamps you have for light, and every clean cloth in this building." The Reverend hesitated only briefly before nodding. "I'll fetch them." Mrs. Cooper appeared in the doorway. "I heard the sheriff's hurt." She took in the scene with the composed efficiency of a midwife. "What do you need, child?" "Boiling water, thread, and steady hands to assist me." As Mrs. Cooper set to work, Miss Palmer entered next, face resolute despite her pallor. "I've basic medical training from my time with the Sanitary Commission. How can I help?" Timothy appeared behind her, eyes huge in his dirty face. "I can help too, Mrs. Walker. I'm not scared of blood." Robin nodded, grateful for every pair of hands. "Timothy, you'll hand me instruments. Miss Palmer, you'll help with the anesthesia. Mrs. Cooper, you'll assist directly." The impromptu surgical team moved with surprising coordination. Robin worked with absolute focus, her hands steady as she located and extracted the bullet from dangerously close to Sean's lung. Blood pooled around her fingers, her face a mask of concentration. Townspeople gathered in the church doorway, watching in silence as Robin fought for the sheriff's life. Even Dr. Benson hobbled in, leaning on a makeshift crutch, his professional criticism giving way to grudging respect as he observed Robin's skilled technique. "Suture?" Robin requested, her voice calm despite the sweat beading her forehead. Mrs. Cooper handed her the needle, perfectly threaded. "Hold this retractor, Timothy. Just like that. You're doing wonderfully." 2 hours passed in intense focus. Finally, Robin tied off the last stitch and straightened her aching back. He needs constant monitoring. The next 12 hours are critical. As the impromptu audience dispersed, some to help with the town's ongoing defense, others to tend the wounded or fight the fires, Robin remained at Sean's side, monitoring his pulse and breathing. Deputy Miller reported that Jeff had helped subdue Victor, who was now locked in his own cell, his hand bandaged but his fury undiminished. "The rest of the gang's either captured or fled," Frank added. "We couldn't have done it without Jeff's help." Night fell over Shady Springs, the fires gradually extinguished, the wounded settled. In the quiet church, Robin sat beside Sean's makeshift bed. Now moved from the altar to the vestry, his breathing had steadied and his fever was mild rather than raging. They were good signs, though he remained unconscious. Mrs. Cooper had finally gone to rest. Ms. Palmer dozed in a pew nearby. Even faithful Timothy had succumbed to exhaustion, curled on a bench with his hand still clutching a roll of bandages. Alone in the lamplight with Sean, Robin allowed herself to take his hand, her thumb tracing the calluses earned from years of hard work and harder justice. "Don't you dare die on me, Sean Callahan," she whispered fiercely. "Not when I've just found my way back to you." She brushed the hair from his forehead, remembering how she'd done the same beside Shady Springs Creek all those years ago, before choices and pride and circumstances had separated them. "I never stopped loving you," she confessed to his unconscious form. "Not through my marriage, not through the scandal, not through any of it. Leaving you was my greatest mistake." She leaned forward, pressing her lips gently to his forehead. "I was too proud to admit I'd chosen wrong and too ashamed to come back. But I'm not too proud anymore, Sean." Her voice caught. "Just please, don't leave me now." In the quiet sanctuary, with only the flicker of candles as witness, Robin held Sean's hand and kept vigil, her prayers mingling with the lingering scent of gunpowder and medicine, of violence and healing, of endings and perhaps new beginnings, healing hearts. 2 weeks after the Reed gang's attack, Shady Springs was slowly mending itself. Buildings bore the scars of bullets and fire, but scaffolding and fresh lumber testified to the town's resilience. The smell of sawdust and paint mingled with the crisp autumn air as Robin made her morning rounds, medical bag in hand. Her cottage was gone, reduced to charred beams and blackened stone. She'd taken a small room at Mrs. Cooper's boarding house, though she spent little time there. Most of her waking hours were divided between tending to the wounded and sitting beside Sean in Mrs. Cooper's spare bedroom, where he recuperated from his surgery. "Good morning, Sheriff," Robin said, entering the sunlit room where Sean sat propped against pillows, a stack of reports on his lap. The bullet wound in his chest was healing well, though still tender and requiring regular care. "Robin," he greeted her, his voice stronger than the day before. "Frank says the last of the Reed gang was captured near Sweetwater yesterday." "Rest first, work later," she chided, setting down her bag and checking his bandages. Her fingers moved quickly, though her touch lingered more than strictly necessary. "How's your breathing today?" "Better. It only hurts when I laugh." "Then I'll avoid being amusing," she replied, the corner of her mouth lifting. "Any fever last night?" Mrs. Cooper says no, though she checked often enough to prevent sleep entirely. Robin smiled. She takes her nursing duties seriously. As she replaced his bandage, a knock sounded at the door. Timothy poked his freckled face into the room, his expression important. "Medical Assistant Timothy reporting, ma'am," he announced. Behind him stood Jeff Reed, looking more respectable with each passing day in clean clothes and a proper haircut. The young man had been pardoned for his crimes in exchange for testimony against his brothers and the assistance he'd provided during the attack. "Deputy Miller needs those wound dressings for Mr. Jenkins," Timothy continued, "and Jeff's here for his shoulder check." "Tell Frank I'll bring them shortly," Robin replied, finishing with Sean's bandage. "Jeff, come in. Let's see that shoulder." Jeff entered, nodding respectfully to Sean. "Sheriff, you're looking better. Here you're helping Frank rebuild the southern fence," Sean commented, studying the young man. "Yes, sir. Least I can do." Jeff's confidence had grown in the days since his brother's capture. Under Frank Miller's surprisingly steady guidance, he'd found purpose in helping repair the damage his family had caused. As Robin examined his healing shoulder, Jeff added, "Deputy Miller's teaching me to shoot straight too. He says I might make a decent lawman someday." Sean raised an eyebrow but didn't disagree. Robin caught the small gesture and hid her smile. Sean Callahan had always seen potential where others saw only problems. After sending Jeff and Timothy with supplies to the other patients, Robin sat beside Sean's bed. Deputy Miller seems to have found a protege. Frank has good instincts about people, Sean replied. Better than mine sometimes. Robin knew he was referring to Victor Reed, now awaiting trial in the territorial prison. The outlaw's threats against Shady Springs continued, though few took them seriously with the gang disbanded. "You're too hard on yourself," Robin said. "This town survived because of your leadership." "And your courage," Sean countered, his blue eyes holding hers. "Shady Springs owes you a debt." Later that afternoon, Robin joined nearly the entire town gathered in the church for a community meeting. The building that had served as an emergency hospital now hosted discussions of rebuilding and recovery. Mayor Wilson stood at the pulpit, spectacles perched on his nose as he read from a list. Jenkins Saloon, almost complete. General store, roof repaired. Doctor's office, operational again. The mayor looked up. "Which brings me to an important acknowledgement. Mrs. Walker." Robin, seated beside Miss Palmer, straightened in surprise. "This town owes you a debt of gratitude," Mayor Wilson continued. "Your medical skill saved many lives, including our sheriff's. Your courage under fire exemplified the best of Shady Springs' spirit." Murmurs of agreement rippled through the crowd. Mrs. Cooper nodded firmly. Wee and Lin Chen smiled from their seats near the back, Molly between them. "Therefore," the mayor continued, "the town council proposes establishing a proper clinic, with you as Shady Springs' official nurse practitioner." Robin blinked in astonishment. Before she could respond, Dr. Benson rose from his seat, leaning on his cane. "If I may," the doctor said, his customary gruffness softened. "I've practiced medicine for 30 years and always believed that proprietary medical schooling was the only path to learn proper healing, but Mrs. Walker proved me wrong." He turned to face Robin directly. "I'd be honored to have you as my partner in practice." The sincerity in his voice left Robin momentarily speechless. Around her, the community she'd feared would reject her waited for her answer. Timothy beamed from his seat beside his father. Miss Palmer squeezed her hand encouragingly. "I'm deeply grateful," Robin finally managed, "and I accept, with one condition." "Name it," Mayor Wilson said. "The clinic must be open to everyone in Shady Springs, every family, regardless of means or background." Lee-Chun stood. "I donate fabric, good quality for clinic curtains." Bart Jenkins rose next. "The boys and I will provide lumber, the finest cuts." "I've already started a collection for new medical supplies," Ms. Palmer added with a warm smile. As the meeting concluded with plans and committees forming, Robin slipped outside, suddenly overwhelmed by the town's generosity. The cool autumn air cleared her head as she walked without conscious direction, eventually finding herself at Shady Springs Small Cemetery. Among the weathered headstones stood a simple marker, erected in Bernard Walker's memory, though his body remained buried in Denver. Robin had avoided this place since her return, but now she stood before it, emotions churning beneath her composed exterior. "I carried so much anger," she said softly to the stone, "at you, at myself, for the choices we both made, the people who were hurt." The afternoon breeze rustled the golden leaves overhead, nature's quiet acknowledgement of her words. "But I'm letting it go now," she continued. "You made terrible mistakes, Bernard. So did I, but holding on to that bitterness won't heal anyone, least of all me." "Forgiveness is harder than hate," a voice said behind her. "Takes more courage." Robin turned to find Sean standing there, pale but steady, his coat buttoned against the chill. "You shouldn't be out of bed," she scolded automatically. "I needed some air." Sean moved carefully to stand beside her. "And to find you. How did you know I'd be here?" "Because I know you, Robin Walker, better than you think." His hand found hers, warm despite the cool day. "You needed to make peace before you could move forward." Robin was once again struck by how well he understood her, even after everything. "Have you been practicing your mind-reading skills, Sheriff?" Just my robin reading skills." His thumb traced circles on her palm. "They're a bit rusty, but coming back strong." They stood in comfortable silence, the tension of past weeks, of past years, slowly dissolving between them. "The mayor's suggesting we use the vacant building beside the sheriff's office for your clinic," Sean said finally. "He says it would be practical to have the town's healer next to its protector." "Quite practical," Robin agreed, unable to suppress her smile. "And what does the sheriff think of this arrangement?" "The sheriff thinks it's about time justice and mercy worked side by side in Shady Springs." Sean's gaze held steady on the horizon. "I've been thinking a lot these past 2 weeks about time and chances." "And what conclusions have you reached?" "That life's too short for grudges, it's too precious for pride." He turned to face her fully. "That sometimes the longest road home is the one most worth taking." Robin felt tears prickle behind her eyes. "You've become quite philosophical during your recovery, Sheriff Callahan. Nearly dying will do that to a man." His smile softened the words. "It makes him realize what matters. Who matters." Their walk back to town was slow, mindful of Sean's healing wound, but neither seemed inclined to rush. They spoke of practical things such as clinic plans, Jeff's progress, and Timothy's enthusiasm for medicine. But beneath the ordinary conversation ran a current of understanding, of possibility that hadn't existed 2 weeks ago. The following weeks passed in a blur of activity. Under Miss Palmer's efficient organization, the vacant building beside the sheriff's office was transformed. Fresh paint brightened the walls, new windows let in ample light, and donated furnishings created a welcoming space. A hand-painted sign appeared over the connected entrances, Shady Springs Medical Office and Sheriff's Department. On opening day, the town gathered for a small ceremony. Jeff Reed stood proudly beside Deputy Frank Miller, a junior deputy's badge pinned to his shirt. Dr. Benson and Robin shook hands before the assembled crowd, symbolizing their partnership. Even Mayor Wilson seemed genuinely pleased, especially when the territorial newspaper photographer captured the moment for posterity. As the crowd dispersed to enjoy refreshments organized by Mrs. Cooper and the town ladies, Sean drew Robin aside, into the quiet of the sheriff's office. "I have something for you," he said, retrieving a package from his desk drawer. "I've been saving it for the right time." Robin unwrapped the brown paper to reveal a medical bag. Her grandmother's, which she'd thought lost years ago. The worn leather had been meticulously restored, the brass fittings polished to a soft gleam. "Sean," she whispered, "how did you—" "Your grandmother gave it to me before she died. She asked me to keep it safe until you were ready to come home again." Sean's expression was tender with the memory. "I kept it all these years. Figured its owner might find her way back someday." Emotion threatened to overwhelm Robin's carefully maintained composure. "You always had faith in me, even when I didn't deserve it." "Not about deserving, Robin. It's about Shaunaving." Sean took her hands in his. "You once told me you wanted to fix everyone who was broken, but sometimes people need to break before they can heal stronger." "Is that what happened to us?" she asked softly. "I think so. 5 years ago I was too rigid in my thinking. You were too uncertain of your path. We both needed to learn some hard lessons." "And now," Robin hardly dared breathe as Sean's hands tightened on hers. "Now I'm asking if you'll consider another partnership." His voice was steady, though she could feel the slight tremble in his fingers. "Not just between the clinic and the sheriff's office, but between you and me. A true partnership in all ways." "Are you proposing to me, Sean Callahan?" Robin's heart hammered against her ribs. "I am, though if you need more time." Robin stopped his words with a kiss, propriety forgotten as she poured 5 years of regret and hope into the gesture. When they finally parted, both somewhat breathless, Sean's smile could have outshone the sun. "I'll take that as a yes," he murmured, his forehead resting against hers. A discreet cough from the doorway announced Timothy's presence. "Begging your pardon, Mrs. Walker, Sheriff," the boy said, his face flushed with embarrassment. "But Dr. Benson says they're ready to cut the ribbon, and folks are asking where you went." "Tell them we'll be right there, Timothy," Sean replied, not taking his eyes off Robin's face. As they walked together toward the gathering, Robin paused in the doorway that connected the sheriff's office to her new clinic. It was a threshold that symbolized more than just adjoining buildings. "Some wounds need more than medicine to heal," she said, taking Sean's hand in hers. "They need forgiveness, second chances, and sometimes coming home." Sean's fingers interlaced with hers as they stepped through the doorway together, the past behind them, the future, bright with promise, waiting ahead.